Hey, I guess I have a quick question for you guys. One of the topics that they wanted me to speak about today, the compensation trends. I find that extraordinarily boring, and I can tell you about it. It's good information to have, but it's not fun to talk about. So I kind of have two different options that we could go with here. We could go with one, I could sit here and just answer questions that you guys have about compensation, or I can give you guys some tips on how to kind of negotiate for more money after you get a job.
After you get a job?
Well, once you get an offer, I should say.
Okay, and also what's negotiable and not negotiable?
Exactly.
And by how much?
All right, so it sounds like you want to talk about salary negotiations. All right, so kind of before we jump into that, kind of the first point that we really need to approach is what exactly is compensation? Because that's where you start talking about what's negotiable or what's not negotiable. So I have some stuff, this is my old presentation, so ignore a lot of this actually. First thing we want to talk about, monetary compensation. You have your base cash, you have your bonuses, you have what your vacation pay itself, your bonus pay itself, any equity that the company might grant you, tangible cash compensation that you put in your bank account every week, every month, whatever it is. Next thing you want to look at is what is your non-monetary compensation. This is where a lot of companies can actually give you that negotiation piece. Typically, on average, companies try and pay between about 20 to 60% of your base salary in total compensation, non-monetary compensation. So whether that's insurance and your dental policies, your healthcare policies, how much of those do they pay for you? How much do they contribute to your retirement plans? How much flexible scheduling do they give you? Do they allow you to work from home? Do they allow your vacation to roll over till the next year? A lot of those things can be negotiated when you start talking about actually negotiating your salary, your offer. So when you're going into a job interview, and to kind of touch on Juanita's points a few minutes ago, when I'm going into an interview, I want to know everything I possibly can about that company. When I interviewed with AMD, I knew exactly what their stock price was trading at. I knew every single thing about all 6 interviewers that I could possibly know about. I knew their entire work history, what their positions were, what their breadth of responsibility was for AMD. I knew their history. I knew exactly where they were ranked in the Fortune 500 list. I knew pretty much every single goal they were going for next year. That information is going to be able to demonstrate the confidence. You're going to be able to say that confidence in that interview, just like Juanita was mentioning to, but it's also going to show value in yourself, that you're willing to do the work and get to know that company. And that's going to be very critical when you start talking about salary negotiations, is how much value have you demonstrated in yourself during that interview. And the more you know about the company, the more you know about the people you are interviewing with, the better you're going to be able to do that. So when you go into that interview process, research that company. I know if you're looking at a job for a publicly traded company, they have what's called a proxy statement. You can go online and just search AMD Proxy Statement 2015. That's going to tell you our compensation philosophy, when we review our employees, what our strategic goals were for last year, how we did on those goals last year, how much we paid our executive based off of those goals for last year. It's going to give you just a ton of information about the company that you may not necessarily get just about researching the company's website. So if it's a publicly traded company, look for their proxy statement, because that's going to give you just a 100-page document in regards to just that company that you can use to research. The next tip that I'm going to give you is know roughly what that job pays. You have kind of a few options to go out there and look for salary, but I'm going to say do not use free salary sources. A perfect example of this, for PayScale, payscale.com, you can go in, you can put in your information on kind of the qualifications you have, the skills, the competencies, all that information. I did that for myself. For myself, it came back for approximately $56,000, somewhere in there for my job, which is reasonable compensation. However, off to the side of their page, it has, well, this is kind of your recommended career path. If you take this position, this is where you could go for the future. So show the promotion, the next job, at $3,000 less than what they were recommending for the job I was at. The reason they do that is because that is all, anyone who wants to go and put data into that system for whatever position they think is a right fit, they can do that. It's not vetted, it's not sourced like the paid salary surveys are. So if you think you have a very good shot at getting a job, make sure to go for a paid salary survey. because that data is going to be significantly more accurate to what you're being paid for that field. I told you that, $56,000 is kind of their offer. I was fortunate enough to, prior to joining AMD, I was a compensation consultant. So I had 10 to 15 different salary surveys available to me. That job actually pays about $85,000. So there's about $30,000 difference from what pay scale said to what the actual job market is. Do not use free salary sources because that's going to skew any type of results that you may have when you go into negotiation process. Big, big, big difference there. So when it comes down to time to actually make the offer, and they start talking about the offer, they send you, okay, these are our terms, these are our conditions. You want to make sure that you're going to negotiate the entire package, not just the base salary. A lot of times people get stuck, well, okay, you're sending me an offer of $50,000, $60,000. Can we bump that up by about 10%, somewhere in there? Okay, sure, that's no problem. We're going to pay you that. Okay, what about stock options? What about sign-on bonus? If I'm having to move, what about relocation expenses? What about company cell phone, company car? What about association memberships? This whole non-monetary list right here, ask if they can throw some of that in there. Because a salary structure for an organization, yeah, they're pretty strict. I know for AMD we have our specific guidelines as to how much we can pay you, and if this is a job range, this is the low, this is the high, this is about what their peers make. So we're pretty stuck in terms of our compensation and what we can pay you. But we're pretty lenient in regards to non-monetary benefits we can offer organizations. I know for our healthcare package, one of the things that we're talking about doing is actually giving our employees Fitbits, because it will allow us to track kind of their healthcare stuff, use it as an incentive for next year to say that if you get on average 5,000 steps a day, you'll get a discount on your healthcare for next year. There's certain things like that, and how many steps per day could even be thrown into that package that you have to get a discount on your healthcare for next year. So there's thousands of things that you negotiate in a package. Don't get stuck on just the base salary. Any questions just about that general stuff that I know I've covered just a lot very quickly? We had a short window, so any quick questions on the compensation, how to negotiate?
What do you negotiate on retirement plans, or am I getting there?
Sure. The question is, what does the company offer on retirement plans? And so let's say there's a company that has your normal 401k package. Typically they're pretty set at matching 5-6%, whatever that may be. The real piece where you're going to make up on any type of retirement plans is maybe on any long-term cash agreements that you might have with the organization. So I know at AMD, one of the things that we've done in the past is, okay, we'll give you a long-term cash agreement. So if you stay employed with us for the next 3 years, we're going to give you $10,000 each of those years towards your retirement. And so it's basically, I'm not going to match, not going to change the percent I match, but I'm going to deposit $10,000 every year for the next 3 years into your retirement account. And so stuff like that can be negotiated. They can't necessarily change that contribution rate, things of that nature, but they can put extra money in there depending on what the retirement plan setup is and the legalities and things of that nature behind it. But there's other options to do that. Same with stock options.
That would be after tax.
Well, depends on how it's all structured. I know with stock options, the way that we currently do the stock options is, say if we're hiring you, the agreements, we're going to give you 5,000 restricted stock units. You're taxed at release. And so up front you have 10,000 units. Over the next 3 years you get 3,300 shares every year. You're basically taxed when that 3,300 shares is released and deposited into your account. And so it depends on what you're offering and how it works, but some of it's taxed and it's not taxed, yes.
That's not a bad thing.
Right, yeah, most of it is going to be taxed ahead of time, and even sometimes with the stock units, they're actually taxed again once you decide to sell them, things like that. So, Uncle Sam likes his money, exactly.
No, he likes your money.
There you go.
These, the sites that you talked about for the salaries, would those help in a situation like at the company I just left? When I was interviewing with them, the recruiter kept telling me, oh, you're never gonna make more than 50,000. That, you know, everybody, you know, and once I got in there, I found out pretty much the entire group that I worked with, everybody makes between about 40 and about 55 tops.
Sure.
Well, I wasn't willing to settle for that, and I overheard someone saying that when one of the engineers went to leave, they offered him 70.
Sure.
So right off the bat, when they went to make me an offer, I demanded 70. They didn't blink an eye.
Sure.
So of course that would make everybody else I work with upset. But
Now,
how do you know?
there's a few different ways to kind of tackle that. The first thing is in the interview process, I always ask, what is your compensation philosophy? Because as an organization, most companies have a set compensation philosophy in place. So let's say the organization says, well, we typically pay at the 40th percentile of the market. So say I'm supposed to make $50,000. If I'm paid at the average of the market, $50,000 is where that is. That company is only going to pay you $45,000, somewhere in there. On the other side of that, if the company says, I'm supposed to make it a 60th, or we pay at the 60th percentile, or they're going to pay more than the market is. So that's going to give you a starting place as to how the company approaches it. The next question is, what salary sources do they use to determine that? Because every salary source that you have is going to give you something different. Pay scale, when you use their paid survey, it's a little bit lower than what either Connexus Comp Analyst or ERI, those are going to come out a little bit higher than pay scale. Pay scale is typically geared more towards nonprofit organizations. So if you're using that for a for-profit publicly traded company, it's going to be very different ends of what their data is designed to do. Once you have those two pieces of information, you can kind of get a mindset as to where that company wants to be in the market. The next question is, say if they offer you $50,000 and you think, okay, I think this is a good company I might want to work for, pay for that analysis to be done on that position. It's going to come back and say, okay, in Austin, based off of this criteria, for this certification, in the technology field, this is the recommended salary that is the average salary. So if they say, okay, we pay at market, the salary surveys that you bought says it's supposed to be $60,000 in the market, they're only offering you 50, then you have some tools to go in there to negotiate with. Don't just take them at your word for it. The next issue that you're going to have, I know from an A&D standpoint, when we are looking to hire someone, we do a peer analysis. We see, okay, we're offering this individual $50,000. Their peers only make $45,000. So what is their experience? What makes them worth that $5,000 extra versus their peers? Because say if, word gets around about compensation, it just happens. So, if one of your coworkers gets word that they've been there for 5 years, but you're coming in and making more money than they are, how did you demonstrate your value to the company? How are you worth that extra money? And so, first thing I would say is have your facts, have your backup support as to why you want to negotiate for more. And then second, you got to show your value as to why you're worth more. So, it kind of sounds like that company's shortchanging a lot of their employees, is my first guess, based off the $40,000 and they offered 70, or they agreed to 70. The second part of that is, right now, especially in Austin, key talent is critical. You have to make sure you keep your key talent. And so if that individual was a key driver in that organization and they could not afford to lose him, then he had the reins. Whatever he wanted to make, they had to pay him pretty much, otherwise he's jumping ship. And so from a company standpoint, that goes to make sure you have a lot of different key holders in the organization that if one person leaves, it's not going to fall apart. So does that answer your question?
Salary history, how does that play into this?
For me,
Do you ask for salary history?
I don't, because I don't want to offer you a salary based off of what you made previously. I want to offer you a salary based on what you're worth and what I think you were worth to the organization. That being said, it does factor in. For A&B, the process that we take, we typically try and avoid any salary histories period. Now, if you're asked for it on a job application, that's going to be a little bit different than how you're actually in the salary negotiation phase. Because on your actual job application, there's not much room to look, this is my salary, this is what I made. But for example, why that's not relevant is that when I was in compensation, a large part of my salary came based off of incentives. If I brought in a client to the organization, that's where I made my money. but they just wanted to know my base salary. That's very different than my total salary. And so what I would say is going into an interview, if you feel like there's something off about your previous salary history, just tell them that. Say, yeah, this was my base salary, but it's not a true reflection of what my total compensation
Well,
was.
see, maybe the other problem, maybe you're afraid if you tell them what your salary was and it was high,
Sure.
you don't want to be eliminated from.
Right.
you know.
Right. It's a real thing. I can't say it's not. Some companies do, some companies don't. The hardest thing about that is trying to kind of diminish their perspective on, oh, he used to be making $100,000. If we offer him 75, he's not going to take it. You have to be able to set that criteria in the interview. Say that I'm very interested in working for this organization. I'm very familiar with your goals and your mission and your vision and your values, and I respect everything that you're trying to go for. And the salary may not necessarily be as important. I used to make $100,000 now. I know the market's a little bit less for that position here. So, how do we approach that when we come to negotiations? That's a whole different subject. But yeah, that thought process, unfortunately, is a real thing in the world, and it's going to happen. That's why, personally, I don't like to do anything based off of previous salary history. I don't like that organizations asks that question, just because when I'm looking at can you do the job, what's your previous salary is not relevant to me. So, unfortunately, it's a real thing in the market. Any other questions?
What about when they asked you, like, say the interview's kind of shutting down and they're like, okay, what are you looking for? Like, what salary would you want?
That's where going
That's where it gets
into
tricky, because it's like
Right.
he said, you don't want to go too high. If you think they're only going to offer you 50, but you're worth 80.
right.
What
To
do you do?
give you guys an example, I'll give you this personal information on me here. Previously, my base salary was $40,000. So when I applied for A&D, base salary $40,000. Well, the market is $85,000 for this position, so it's double what I'm making now. The key to it is having your expectations set. Do your research. What is the market supposed to be paying based off of these different salary surveys, and present that confidently. All goes back to confidence, just like Juanita said. Sure, I was making $40,000, but I expect 80 at least to be the offer for this position because that's what the market is.
Okay.
Again, it all goes down to compensation philosophy of the company and what the market surveys come down to. So if you get those two pieces of information, you should have a rough idea of where the offer is going to be.